We are now on air. Time for a total takeover.
It's finally here. Welcome to a new episode.
It's about to go down.
First and foremost, giving honor to God and to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for allowing me to see another day. You are tuned into the Dan Adams Show. DA, the prosecutor, and the arbiter of truth. But I do want to talk about a topic real quick. You know the phrase, and I don't know if I'm saying it correctly. Stand for nothing, fall for anything. But that's what I'm saying in this particular broadcast of the Dan Adams Show. Stand for nothing, fall for anything. Now let me preface my statement with this. I am not an insensitive prick. Okay, and I'm being very, over the top with it, but I want to make sure that this point is very clear. I am not an insensitive prick. But, man, I got the hiccups this morning. But, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to basic facts that have been facts, the truth, since day one, since the beginning of life of human beings, that there's only two genders. If you want to go and live your life the way you want to live it and not be pulled in, dragged in, and I'm sorry for the tunnel this morning, pulled in, dragged in to a particular agenda, you just want to live your life and be left alone, which most LGBTQ TIA plus, I don't know if I'm even saying that correctly because they got so many letters now. But if you are a part of that community and you want to be left alone to live your life, I'm all for it. As a heterosexual male, married with children, do you see me going out and screaming from the mountaintops that I'm heterosexual? And that, if you don't fall in line with the fact that I'm heterosexual, then you're a bigot? Do you see me doing that? No. Well, if, and especially with the latest craziness in regards to women's rights, women who were born women and who are continually, and I mean continually, not, all of a sudden, I've been a man for 20 years, and the fact that I chose a sport where I'm not dominating, swimming, Leah Thomas, Will Thomas, where I'm not dominating, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead one day and just say I'm a woman, and then now I can just completely dominate the sport that I couldn't when I was, and I shouldn't say when I was, he still is a man, Will Thomas. Can't you see between the lines, ladies and gentlemen? If you don't stand up to this, then you will fall for anything. And I'm taking a stance right now. I know there are individuals who may struggle in regards to their gender and what they think, who they are, what they should be, how they should live their life. That is something that should be done in private. That is something that should be done in the scope of, especially if you're a person under 18, something that should be dealt with your parents and your doctor. But when you're streamlining an agenda to the point where you're having 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds going to strip clubs, going to bars, and watching men with fake boobs prance around in women's clothing, and you sit there and think that shit is funny, that it's entertaining, that your 5-year-old or your 6-year-old is putting dollars into the G-string of a man with fake boobs. I don't care what you believe, where you stand, and where you align in regards to transgenderism. You want to call me a transphobic bigot? Do whatever the hell you want. I'm not that. None of us out here who question the craziness that's going on in this arena is a transphobic bigot. You've taken it upon yourself to make this your cause. You've taken it upon yourself to make this agenda yours. Let's see, 15, 20 years ago, do you think there was 5 and 6-year-olds in strip clubs and in bars putting dollars into the G-string of a man wearing women's clothing and fake boobs? You bet your ass there wasn't. But now, and I have to blame COVID and the COVID lockdown, they seized that opportunity and now they're running with it. Granted, it was in place before COVID, sprinkling here and there, but they chose COVID because of the restrictions that were put on parents and children. That when the floodgates open in regards to kids being able to go back to school, these woke administrators, these woke teachers, these teachers' unions who are backing this wokeism took it upon themselves to say, hey, this is our opportunity. And I'm thinking to myself, if you're an adult, an adult, supposedly a grown-up, and you've taken this position to where you have infiltrated the minds, the hearts, and the souls of 5 and 6-year-olds in order to uplift, in your mind, your agenda and make it mainstream, then I have a problem with it, major problem with it. And I'm not going to sit by just because you call me a transphobic bigot. I'm going to sit by and stay silent. It's not going to happen. Never will happen. And when you're trying to strip away the innocence of our young children who are coming up in this world, who have so much to go through, figure out, they got enough on their plate. They don't need your transgenderism and your gender binary bullshit being shoved down their throats every damn day. Wokeism and that bullshit shoved down their throats every damn day. You should be teaching 2 + 2 = 4. Nouns, predicates, verbs. You know, the shit that us, our age, grew up on and had to learn in order to maintain and ultimately make that big decision as to what you want to be the rest of your life or what you want to do for the rest of your life. When you're an adult and you're on your own and you're doing what you need to do in regards to obtaining that self-fulfillment, and you've had questions about who you are, what you are, then at that point, you do what you need to do behind closed doors, in private. I don't need to know about it. I don't need it shoved in my face. Because you know damn well, if I started a heterosexual alphabet mafia, or if we heterosexuals started an alphabet mafia, your community in it, and it's funny. Been talking to a lot of people within this community. They want to be left the hell alone. You have these advocates who are the ones who are screaming the loudest. And they're not even part of the community per se. They're just an advocate. But there are some who are a part of that community who are screaming loud. But from what I am seeing, and I do your own research, your own work on this, this is what I'm seeing on my end. It's these advocates that are making this community look bad in many people's eyes. There's going to be people who are going to fight against this, which in most part we should be fighting against, especially when it comes to our children. Our children should be left alone. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, as I end this portion of the show, I'm not a transphobic bigot. I'm not a gender identity bigot. I'm not a bigot at all. As I stated before, when you're born a man, you're a man the rest of your life. Doesn't matter if you cut off your penis. It doesn't matter if you get fake boobs. It doesn't matter if you dress up as a woman. When you die, they pull up your bones from your grave and do a DNA test. They will know that you were a man, and vice versa. And for the vice versa, for these individuals out here for years screaming about the GOP is attacking women, you know, there's an assault on women and things of that nature. What do you think the left is doing now to women and allowing these so-called transgender athletes and things of that nature, these so-called Leah Thomases, even though he's Will Thomas, being allowed to enter the arena to where they can dominate because they couldn't dominate as a man? Where are all the women who have stood up for women's rights? Where are you? Not seen, not heard, except for a few. And for the few who do speak up, they are railroaded. They are canceled. You got to come out and apologize like Macy Gray did the other day. What is there to apologize for? When we all know there's only two genders. What is there to apologize for? I would never apologize for speaking the truth. And seeing that we're on the lines of speaking the truth, last little statement I want to talk about, and it's actually a question. If, ladies and gentlemen, if you are still a supporter of former Vice President Sleepy Joe Biden, if you still support that man, then you must hate America. America is now in a state of flux. It's in a state of flux. And we are in a trajectory that if, hopefully in November, that we could at least stem the tide in regards to this woke leftist, this complete and utter idiotic Green New Deal, transgenderism. Every article of leftist ideology that's being pushed upon us needs to be pushed back against. And until we have majorities in either one of the houses of Congress, things are going to get pushed through that we don't want pushed through. And I am thankful, ladies and gentlemen, for senators like Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who at least see some of this stuff as this is complete and utter nonsense, and I ain't falling for it. So until next time, God bless you and yours. May He keep you and your families safe. God bless. Peace.
A local councilwoman is facing charges after police were called to her home for a stabbing. Sabrina Miller is charged with 2 counts of assault and resisting arrest. Miller is a council member for Bellevue Borough. Early Saturday morning, officers found Miller's husband stabbed in the leg. He said it was self-inflicted. Moments later, police found Miller with fresh scratches and red marks on her neck. They explained that they were investigating her husband's injury. That's when Miller allegedly began to yell and then punch the officer in the back of the head. Police say Miller and the officer struggled before she was arrested. A former colleague of Miller's issued a statement after her arrest saying in part, "I am saddened to hear about Sabrina's behavior and the altercation."
First, with the pain at the pump, more people than ever are interested in electric cars.
But if you're thinking about going electric, pay attention to this story. 10 Tampa Bay's Malik Rankin has the warning from one family who's now facing some expensive decisions.
I was really excited.
17-year-old Avery Sawinski was thrilled to get an electric 2014 Ford Focus.
And it was fine at first. I loved it so much. It was like small and quiet. And just
the car had 60,000 miles on it.
All of a sudden, it just stopped working.
Avery says she had it for 6 months before the battery died.
I know that the Ford stopped making the car, but it just is frustrating that they stopped making the battery too. So it left like hundreds of people without a car to use.
Last month, Avery's dad died following a stage 4 colon cancer diagnosis. Her grandfather, Ray Sawinski, stepped up trying to get an electric car battery replacement.
It turns out that this is a pretty common problem with this particular car.
The family bought the used car for $11,000 on Carvana.
The Ford dealership advised us that we could replace the battery. It would only cost $14,000.
And that doesn't include installation costs.
So if you're wondering where that car is now, it's been here at AutoNation for months. Ray Sawinski tells me they've offered to buy the car from him, only offering $500.
Sawinski says he's learned it's not just Ford Focus owners dealing with costly electric car battery replacements.
If you're buying a new one, you have to realize there is no secondhand market out there because the manufacturers aren't supporting the cars.
The Sawinski's message to you, do your research before buying electric. They warn it may cost you far more than you realize. Malik Rankin, 10 Tampa Bay.
Wow. We reached out to Ford. They have not answered our questions yet about what customers are supposed to do when these electric car batteries die.
After a season of dumping on its female swimmers, forcing them to compete against a biological man who now says he is a woman, forcing them to share a locker room with said swimmer, dismissing their and their parents' concerns summarily at every turn, even telling the female swimmers what they needed if they objected to the trans swimmer was therapy, the university now sticks a final thumb in the women's eyes, nominating this trans swimmer who goes by the name Leah Thomas as the University of Pennsylvania's NCAA Woman of the Year. This is a disgrace. Leah Thomas is not a woman. Leah Thomas is a trans woman who lived the first 20 years of her life as Will Thomas, a man. She only decided to transition in 2020 after swimming 3 seasons as a middling competitor on the men's team, ranking in the mid-500s. On the women's team, the very next year, ranked number 1. How does a person who lived 20 years as a man, 2 as a woman, and in those 2 stole several female swimming records wind up anyone's Woman of the Year? This must be some kind of sick joke. meant to increase resentment towards trans people. That is one of the reasons it's so stomach-turning. Most trans people, and I know plenty of trans people, including in my own family, want to be left alone and not have their gender constantly discussed or made somebody else's cause, or to worm their way into a sport in which they know they have a physical advantage. The law has already changed to make sure that trans people may not be legally discriminated against because of their gender identity in the workplace setting. As for sports, it's a much trickier debate, given the physical advantages post-pubescent boys and men have over women. This used to be a given. It is why we needed Title IX, which is supposed to protect girls' equality in the field of athletics. But the Biden administration wants to change all that, making it unlawful to exclude trans athletes from girls' sports. It's pushing a reform of Title IX right now that does not yet specifically focus on sports, but make no mistake, it's coming. And Team Biden has already made clear that's what they think is fair, not to create a third category for trans swimmers, not to find a more fair way of letting them compete, but to making the girls' team accept biological men who say they're trans women in their swimming lane and other sports. The female swimmers at UPenn worked hard as young girls to make it in swimming, to make it to Ivy League swimming in the case of UPenn, swimming at the elite level. I mean, not for nothing, but they swam with growing breasts, growing hips, more fat on their bodies, less upper body strength than their male competitors. They swam with shorter legs, for the most part, than the boys, thinner and weaker muscles than the boys. They swam with periods and cramps and bloating. And the women on that team and the others at the college level did it all, despite these relative physical disadvantages when compared to their male colleagues. Then at UPenn, in the course of 1 year, they saw their medals, first place finishes, NCAA tournament spots, and records stolen from them by a person who was a crappy male swimmer on the men's team months earlier. When they quietly objected, they were called bigots or sent to therapy by their school. Leah Thomas, meanwhile, enjoyed every minute of the spotlight. Thomas was allowed to swim with the women only because the NCAA only required 1 year of hormone suppressant therapy for a trans woman to compete in women's sports. No one cared about the fact that Thomas is over 6 feet with far greater lung capacity, wingspan, muscle and bone mass, etc., than Thomas's female competitors. Shut up about it, or we'll ruin your future swimming and professional prospects. That was the clear message by the university to the women. Thomas told ABC News she was having a great time. This is a dream come true, and that she would love to keep swimming right into the Olympics. To argue against that, Thomas contended, was to be an anti-trans bigot. Thomas went on to crush the 500 freestyle at the NCAA championships and is now the women's title holder. And there is UPenn yet again ready to shiv Thomas's female teammates with this latest nomination. Leah Thomas is not Woman of the Year. That title belongs to one of the women who dealt with all of the physical and emotional challenges and opportunities that come with being an actual woman. All right? From cramps to crying to being smaller and yes, often weaker, and yet triumphing over it all. Not to a 6'3" biological man who within the last 2 years declared that he was a woman. Period.
Minneapolis mother is standing up to Black Lives Matter's protesters, and she is also defending the police in the shooting death of Andrew Sundberg after a 6-hour standoff. Arabella Foss Yarbrough said she was the one who called police on Sundberg, who was her neighbor. She claims he terrorized her and her 2 children, and she told the BLM activists gathered outside her apartment building that this case is very different from other police-involved killings. Watch.
That man was armed. George Floyd was not armed. Breonna Taylor was not armed. This man intentionally tried to kill us. For 3 years I lived here, and none of you guys knocked on that man's door to see if he was okay. Not at all. He played loud music every day to cope with his mindset. There was casings in the hallway. The shot went through my door to the pillar
I don't.
Now I can't get my shit because all you guys want to be here. My kids have to see you guys celebrate a man's life that tried to kill him.
She did get an apology from Sundberg's family, who was also at the protest, but they are claiming that his death could have been avoided, and they want police to release the body cam footage. This is all still under investigation. It's important that we remember we do not know all the facts yet. Steve, this is just tragedy upon tragedy here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the last point you made. We've got to wait and see all of the facts come out. But, you know, it's pretty clear what she thought was happening. And what she was trying to do was defend and protect the lives of her children. She thought they were under threat. And it's such an insult for that to now be thrown back in her face by a mob outside her house. The other thing, I think, is the contrast between this situation, where you've now got people screaming and saying the cops shouldn't have taken out the shooter, and look at the other news story we've seen in the last 24 hours from Uvalde, where the whole nation is screaming at the cops for not going in and taking out the shooter. You know, it's so difficult to get these things right, but in this case, what we're hearing from the police is that they tried incredibly hard for hours to try and solve the situation without taking that final step, right? And then there's a final point I'd make, which is, actually, it doesn't matter what we discuss here and soberly look at the facts and the arguments. The people behind those kinds of protests, you see this on the left now, they're just ideologues. The facts don't matter. It's an opportunity to push their ideology, their extremist, far-left ideology, and they're not going to listen to any facts because they just want to go out there and make their point.
And as we learn all the facts, Harris, and wait for them to develop, I think it sort of begs the question, and as we have these national conversations and Steve brings up ideology, the reality is nuanced, and all lives matter, and tragedies unfold in ways that you can't predict, and that's where training kicks in. That's where these officers' training is so paramount. And that's something that struck me was when Foss Yarbrough was saying, you know, she said, I had 5 minutes to live while he had 6 hours to choose life or death. She said the police stated they did not want to kill him. And the mother of Teagle, Cindy Sundberg, she said at a press conference, I wish I could wrap my arms around her and tell her I'm so sorry. He was an imperfect human. We are all imperfect.
I want to give some support to this mom today.
Yeah.
Because she didn't get that right after this happened. She is a woman of color. You got to watch the whole thing. She says, I am a woman of color. Who do BLM care for? Because it isn't us. I'm a black woman. I don't think they have my best interest at heart. Not when I look at places like Chicago and the black on black crime and crime period in areas that affect people of color the most. And they don't protest like this. Where are they all? Who do they care about? She said, didn't you care about this young man when he was cranking his music so loud because he was dealing with some of the things that were well known apparently in the building or in the area? I agree with her. His life could have been spared. You know who could have spared it? The people who knew that this potentially was a problem for him. The anger, the hurt, the angst, whatever he was feeling. That we're not doctors either. Not only are we not the prosecutors on the case, we're not the doctors. But this mom and others apparently knew that he had issues. And she screamed out, why didn't you help him when you could have? She's right about that. And thank God that she and her children are okay and that it's damage that can be repaired. But you know what can't be repaired? Black Lives Matter protesters prove to the people of color that you say you represent, that you really see us and care about all of us, particularly the victims. I mean, this is like a bunch of liberal DAs now. They don't even see us. We're at war with criminals. Either you do that or stop saying that you represent anybody who looks like me, because you don't mean it.
Right. And Kaylee, to that end, you know, if all lives are equal and everyone is represented equally in that way, this woman, Foss Yarbrough, she claims she's not been able to go back to her apartment. She's lost her job. She talks about the trauma her two children have faced after having their apartment shot up. These are her allegations. And she says, what about me and my children of color? Will they be left behind too?
That's exactly right, Emily. Her quote was, I have black children. I am a woman of color. If I would have lost my life, would you guys have done this for me? And I think that she makes a very key point here, that we in the media selectively pick victims. I don't want to say we, because I don't include Fox News or us in that. We cover all things, but we should not do that. The media has a responsibility to cover all of these stories, even ones that don't fit an ideological agenda. and our national leaders as well. I remember the murder of George Floyd, and I remember watching that video with President Trump, and he was upset by it. He was angry by it. So too was I. That was murder. That was an injustice. But there are certain names that he highlighted. David Dorn is one of them. Legend Taliaferro. Their names didn't make it outside of Fox News. They didn't. CNN didn't cover them. MSNBC didn't cover them because they were victims of crime. Victims of crime matter too. The murder of George Floyd mattered. Victims of crime matter. So stop picking victims that you care about and start covering injustice when you see it. Because this mom with her little babies, bullets coming through her apartment, that deserves coverage.
It does. And Carly, you know, recently we've been talking about the faith that has been eroded by Americans in media, in mainstream media. For that reason, they see an agenda being pushed. They see a conclusion being drawn before the facts have played out and the investigation being pursued. They say, why do you think that we've been turning off the TV?
Yeah.
It's because we don't trust the coverage because it's not fair.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And the thing that struck me about this story, so much struck me about the story, that woman's words were so powerful, and it really comes at a really important time where she's really standing up for a lot of victims. Because we live in a time right now where criminals are being prioritized over victims. And it's not just Black Lives Matter, it's also district attorneys, it's judges.
Very much so.
Who are ruling in favor of the criminal. And every single time you do that, you victimize the victim once again. And in this situation, she did bring up her children. She said, I'm a woman of color, like you said. My children are Black, 2 and 4 years old, by the way. And she said, would you be protesting if I had died or my children have died? And one of the protesters said, yes, ma'am. And you know that's not true. Because out of the over 270 children that have been shot in Chicago since 2021, over 100 children have been shot in Philadelphia so far this year. Not a single Black Lives Matter protest on their behalf.
There you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So who do they represent and who do they care about?
Well,
I mean, they may as well leave the B or anybody, not even all. Just leave that blank. Whose lives matter? Question mark.
Well, it's very clear what it is an ideological anti-police agenda, and they exploit any opportunity to push that. That's actually what's going on.
Exactly.